How did you get to New York City?
I always wanted to be in New York City. I wanted to be in New York City my entire life and was just counting the days until I could move back here.
Did you grow up here?
I was born here, but we moved when I was 5 to Richmond, Virginia. And I always wanted to come back ever since 5. I was like, I like Richmond, but New York is better.
You came here after college, or what actually triggered your move here?
Yeah. I moved here right after I graduated.
Okay. At that time, did you already know becoming a professional artist was the goal? I'd love to hear the arc of like when that began to stir in you as an interest of something you may want to actually pursue.
Yeah. I had a studio practice at like age 4.
Really?
Yeah. There was a little corner of of the apartment that had a little tiny easel. And I continued that into, age 5, 6, et cetera. I got in trouble for selling art at school twice. And as an elementary school student, you're not supposed to sell stuff at school, apparently.
A little hustler.
Yeah, I was hustling. They shot that down. I wish they hadn't, because it's a good skill. It would have been good to have that. But I kind of always knew I wanted to be an artist. I've waffled on like whether it's a visual artist or, I've explored other things, but it's kind of always been a constant. And as a teenager, I was like, I'm going to art school. Like that's the plan.
What kind of art were you into from the very early, like when you were trying to sell things at school? Was it paintings? What kind of stuff were you doing?
Well, in elementary school, it was unicorn drawings because I loved unicorns and so did everyone else. Yeah. And then I moved on to more portrait type work. And from there started doing, like in high school, I was doing these like conceptual pieces that was like placing a Wonder Bread on the table for the Last Supper and like doing these kind of weird, I had a picture of an angel holding an iPod, and I was like very interested in sort of these weird confluences of art history and like contemporary branding and objects and life.
Is art and painting in your genes? Do you have family members that do this?
I don't have any family members that pursued professional art careers. I have some extended family members that painted on the side. But my mom was very supportive of me as an artist. She told me she was an art history major in college, and she told me that she had always kind of wanted to be an artist and didn't really feel that that was a viable path, or that she was very encouraged in pursuing that. And she said, people told her it wasn't realistic, and she always wanted to do things differently with me. So she was really, really supportive of me as an artist. And my dad was as well. He really kind of took up arms and sort of saying, Elise is going to be an artist. How do we support her and make this happen?
Tell me about high school. Were you already, it sounds like you wanted to go to art school. That was eventually the goal. Did you go to an arts high school, or what's the story there?
No, I went to a small Episcopal school in Richmond, and it wasn't an art school, but I had a really great art teacher, and I decided I really wanted to study art for college. And I think I applied to all these different art schools, but my dad was a little worried about me going to just a strictly art school. He really wanted me to have a liberal arts school. So he kind of helped me figure out how to strategize liberal arts, like good liberal arts schools that had good arts programs. And so that I was applying to art school, but then I also was looking at programs that weren't strictly like visual arts.
Where did you land? What did you do?
Princeton, which was kind of interesting. They had, the year that I was applying, they were doing this sort of like art and humanities recruitment initiative, where they were looking for students that were strong in the arts and humanities as well as strong academically. And I just, happened to sort of right time, right place. It really worked out.
From the time you were 5 and you're starting to 4 or 5 when you're beginning to do art in the corner, and through high school and going into college, do you regard that desire to create as just an instinct that you have? Like, some people are runners, some people are mathematicians. There's just something about their nature that drives them to do that kind of work. How do you think about that for yourself?
Yeah, I think it's two different things. I think you do have to have that impulse. It needs to be like, it's deep. It's really in there.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of people have that for different things. There's different impulses, whether it's creative or whether, like you said, with athletes, they have just this, this thing where they just feel in their body. I think that we have these instincts that we are born with and that we come to, and you might have that quashed. Like, I think a lot of people, it's very hard to maintain that and nurture that thing, and we end up kind of pushing it down or repressing it because it doesn't get supported and nurtured, and it's very easy to lose it. But if you have a little bit of support and you have someone who nurtures you and you have someone who supports you at the pivotal years where you could lose it, then you're kind of stuck with it, and then you're forced to have to you're sort of like, oh, well, I'm never going to be happy unless I find a way to do this.
Is that how you think about yourself?
I mean, I'm teasing a little bit, but yeah, it's kind of like a blessing and a curse, right? Like you love, it's the most important thing in the world, but you also don't have, I think about, there's so many careers, and so many paths that would be so much easier and chiller, but that's that's just not realistic. I'm not going to be happy or content. I'm too curious and excited, and I see the world through a visual context, and that's just too ingrained. And also, of course, you say that, you're like, oh, if only I was a different person, then it would be so easy. But of course, that's not actually how it works either. Like, everybody has things that drive them and passions, and it's just trying to find a way to live this life and be fulfilled.
To someone who is a non-painter and really a non-artist, how do you describe the impulse to do what you do? We're sitting in your studio with a bunch of your incredible artwork surrounding us. Is it a love of the process, a love of the flow? Like, what has kept you going back to the easel all these years to keep doing this? And maybe it's something you don't really completely understand, but if you have any words to put to that, I would love to hear it.
I think it's a little bit of painting for me is a form of thinking. And I think that if I had a lot of exposure as a younger person to some other medium or craft or way to sort of manifest and craft thought and explore ideas and build concepts, that, I could have just as easily maybe ended up in some other art form or maybe even another path altogether. But because I have this background, and now that I've really been trying to seriously pursue art, and especially in the last year in particular, I've really been trying to develop my craft and to make it easier and easier to be able to channel the things that are in my mind and the things that I'm curious about and exploring and want to share.
You mentioned that your dad was insistent or was interested in you having some strategy behind your decision making when you were a teenager about where you went to school and what you were applying yourself to. And I know you well enough to know that art is a huge part of your life, but it's not the only part of your life at this point. How have you thought, or how did you think about the financial reality of life? We live in New York, with the need to create, especially when you graduated and you first got here. How did you survive? What did you do to be able to honor the artistic instinct while also paying your bills?
Yeah, well, I think that's definitely a problem that a lot of creatives in New York and kind of everywhere really struggle with is how do you find the time and attention to focus on your craft, and how do you balance that with trying to, pay for your life and, sustain everything. And, the best avenue is if you can find a way to monetize your craft without losing the parts of it that make it really compelling and interesting and allow you to actually have it be an expressive medium. For me, I tried a few different things, and what's worked the best for me was I had a sort of a fortuitous situation. I started working at a marketing company during the pandemic because I just wasn't feeling very creative. My studio that I'd been at had to close because it was like an open air space. I moved back home and I was just feeling like really, really stuck. And I went back to work. And I ended up at this company that was doing digital marketing for like nonprofits. And the person who was the creative director left the company, and they had me fill in as interim because there was, it was like supposed to be a temporary thing while they found somebody new. And I was like, oh, Elise, she does art, can you fill this role just in the meantime while we find someone? And I just loved it. I really took to it because it is a similar part of my brain. It's, the storytelling, the crafting, the design, working with designers to build the vision and the story. But it was, because I was working with designers rather than actually doing the design myself, it didn't let me sort of turn it into my art. Like it kept the separation that I needed. So it was a similar kind of part of my brain and a part, an impulse and a creative work, but a really nice way to isolate and separate it from the visual artwork that I was doing. And I've sort of turned that into a balance that I continue to maintain. I still do design work for nonprofits and universities and brands, and I take on work while also maintaining a studio practice that I do consistently every day.
I don't know if you have a general outlook on this or a general piece of advice for people who you've met who are a younger version of you trying to come to New York and be an artist, but is it your general opinion that splitting your time where part of your day is about making money and part of your day is about honoring your art is generally the right way to go on an artistic path? How do you think about that personally?
Yeah, I think the most important thing, depends on it of course depends on your specific situation, but I think that a lot of the time we use needing to make money or needing to have a certain financial security as an excuse to procrastinate and not show up for ourselves creatively or artistically. And I think the most important thing is getting out of this like feast or famine where you sort of procrastinate on your artwork and make a bunch of excuses and say you need to be doing all this work and let work get in the way or whatever. And then all of a sudden you like make a bunch of work, you like binge it, you let the ball drop on all the other things in your life so that you can be a creative, and you like radically alternate between these two. That's not the way to do it. I know how definitely not to do it. I think the most important thing is you need to develop like ritual. You need to take it to a level. People used to say like art was spiritual, and I was always a little bit like, I don't know, I'm like, I feel like I'm in this analytical mind. I was like, I don't know about that. And actually, I get it now, and it's real. Like you have to treat it like it's your religion, and you have to have consistency, and you don't have to paint for 8 hours a day. You need to paint for 1 hour a day. You need to actually allocate time, and it can be a little bit of time, but you need to do it. You need to actually do it, and you need to give focus to it, and it needs to be something where if you don't do it, like you need to sort of give it that religiosity and spirituality and meaning, because otherwise everything else in your life will get in the way. So I would say whatever you need to do, whatever you need to figure out, everyone's very creative and everyone can figure out what that means for them uniquely. But start with your art at the beginning of the morning, because otherwise the rest of the life will get in your way. If you wake up and you do your art even for just a little bit every day, you will make way more momentum. And sometimes it doesn't take, you'd be surprised how much progress you can make by just a little bit of consistency and having it be the first priority in your life.
I'd love to go back to your art and the story of you as an artist, and how I'm fascinated by the question of how much the all of the hours that have gone into you being able to produce what I'm looking at right now, do you regard primarily the ability for you at this point in your life to create what I'm witnessing as mostly due to hard work, or did you have, separating your own ego from this, like an objective talent that most 5-year-olds, most 10-year-olds, most 15-year-olds just don't really possess when it comes to being able to create things? How do you think about that for yourself?
Yeah, I don't. There's some advice that I've seen this in different places, but it didn't really hit until one day it did. You know, it all clicked into place, and I was like, oh, people have been trying to tell me this in like books or in person forever, and I didn't get what it actually meant. But I don't think that I think the question is sort of irrelevant because it's not a very useful question to ask yourself or to like lean into. What really makes the difference is if you go into trying to make work and you're like, I need to make something really good right now. Okay, brain. Okay, do it now. Now's the time. Come up with something brilliant. You're not going to come up with something brilliant. That's not, like, if you try to force it, it doesn't usually work that way. The times when I make the best work are when I think of myself more as a channel for work rather than as a thing that a person that needs to create something good. And instead of giving myself like a pep talk, it's more like you let yourself get into actual flow. And it doesn't really matter if what you're making is good or not in that particular moment. You just have to make work. If you just keep making work, then you're eventually going to get better, right? And you might make some stuff that kind of sucks on Monday. But if you painted Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and you're talking to other artists and other creatives and getting their thoughts on your work, but then not overweighting it and just letting yourself kind of flow, you're eventually going to make something where you're making work that makes sense of your time, and you will have something to say. So you focus less on trying to architect it and thinking about whether you're good or not, and you actually just do it.
You mentioned the word spirituality and religiosity or religion a minute ago. And I want to get into like the psychology and the psychic experience for you when you are working here in your studio and how you've worked for all these years. Do you find if you don't almost submit to your craft, you get depressed? That like this is almost like a prerequisite to health, like sleep. Yeah. For you to be a well human being. I'd love to hear how you think about that too. Yeah, no, that's actually a great question.
So when I'm not making art, it's true. That's usually not a good indicator.
You're not doing great.
Not making art. It's probably a bad sign. It might be okay. Every now and then you're just making art because it's Christmas and you're with your family or something. You know, it's not a hard and fast rule, but yeah, general strokes. If I'm not making creative work, it's probably not good. And I think that's true for a lot of people who are creatives or, you know, again, looking at this, there's athletes, you know, if they're not running or moving, they're probably they're not thriving. But I think that for me, I really struggled with the fact that my brain, like my eye for art, was a lot more developed than my actual ability to paint it for a very long time. And when I was young, I was really unafraid. Like I wasn't worried if I was good enough. I was like, I'm good. Like I got this. I was just like making stuff and I wasn't worried about it. And then people were giving me advice on how to be better. And I was taking that and implementing it. And at some point, what I think happens to a lot of people, I suddenly like the mirage, like it was broken. It was like, oh no, maybe I'm not just like a superhero. Maybe I'm not good enough, but also combined with like a literal, I would look at my work and be like, oh, that's not what I wanted that to look like. I go and I see paintings that I think are really good, and I see art that I think is really good, and then I try to make it work that I think is good, and I can tell it's not. Like I can see it because my eye and my mind is more developed than my work, and also the amount of time to try to get it to the place I wanted to get it is also a slog, you know? Mm-hmm. And I finally had to kind of get out of that mindset. Just make stuff. And it's okay if it's not good. Just make stuff. Because you don't get to be good without believing in yourself and believing you can get there. And you have to have kind of a delusional belief that you'll get there, because otherwise you don't.
Yeah. I think you kind of need both. You need this like belief in yourself and an ability to self-criticize at the same time. And I guess maybe it gives you something to shoot for if you now have an eye that's a little bit more aligned with reality to what you're trying to become.
Yeah.
I don't know if you agree with that.
No, that's exactly it. And it's a balancing act between being humble and being, realistic where you need to and being self-critical, but also being a bit delusional about where you can get to. And I think a really good example is people who are rock stars believed they could be rock stars. Yeah. There's no rock stars that didn't think they could be at least very good musicians with who made music that mattered. You have to have that thought first before you can become. And so this is like a little bit manifesty, but there is some truth to it, which is that if you can't visualize a future where you're making good work that matters, it's very hard to do the work and go through the failure to get to that place.
I would love to hear about the psychological experience for you generally when you're doing this kind of work. I have found in the artists that I've interviewed that typically when they believe they are a stand-up comedian, a filmmaker, a painter, an actor, an actress, and they're not doing that, they do experience some sort of like decay internally. When you are at the easel and making your art and your artwork, is it typically a sense of euphoria? Is it just a sense of calm? Is it many different things? Like, is there a feeling, a positive or maybe negative feeling that kind of keeps you coming back? I'd love to hear about what the experience typically is like for you.
Yeah, I fall into flow state very easily and quickly. The problem is getting myself... I have a hard time getting myself to stand in front of my easel with my brush, turn the phone off, and do it. But then once I do that, I fall into a flow state very easily. And that state is so nice. You can't maintain it for too long because I will totally forget about all of my physical needs. And I'll if I do it for too long, all of a sudden I'll be like, wow, my neck... my neck hurts really badly and I didn't drink water today. And you're like, oh shoot, that's not so good. You have to kind of force yourself to take little breaks, but the flow state itself is such a incredible space. And that's when you're just you're channeling, you're flowing, you're letting things come out of you. And it's happening in this way that it's mindful, it's critical. I am editing and I'm, pushing colors and moving paint and going, yes, this works. Yes, this doesn't, and iterating, but I'm totally in the work in my, I'm fully present. And to be completely, I think that's the thing that people find, so intoxicating and so necessary to yourself, is to have moments in your life where you are fully present. You are completely in the now and you're not thinking about anything other than what you're doing in this moment.
I'm fascinated by habits, and I think you have already alluded to the idea that a lot of the work is just sort of giving yourself over to the project, whatever you happen to be working on that day. And I'd love to hear about, in whatever detail you want to share, what habits you have found. And I think you also were alluding to, discipline, the consistency component to making great work or making work in general. What habits in your life that you have found have really helped you get into that flow state to, kind of honor that time of the day when it's just you and a blank whatever you're painting on? I'd love to hear about that from you.
Yeah. Okay, so this sounds a little silly, but it's really helped. I find that just getting started is kind of hard, and then once I'm started, I'm fine. And then also stopping so that you can be more consistency is better than like instead of painting all day, paint 3 hours and then go do your errands, and like do your other stuff. Like that's a way better practice. So it's starting and it's also stopping. That is the hardest thing. So what I do, I have a friend and we have a Zoom meeting at 9 a.m. every day.
Really?
Yeah. And we get on and we say hi. And I say what I'm going to work on for the next, increment of time, the next hour. And they say what they're going to work on. And then we work and we just have the video on. And this is based on, there's like a tech startup that's called Flow Club that basically pairs you with a little cluster of like 5 other people on a video. And you do that. You say what you're going to work on and then you work on the video. Everyone works on their things. And then you check in at the end of the time. And it's just nice. It's a little bit of accountability. It's a little bit of just help getting started. But I've got the kind of folding in other artists that can help keep you accountable to just literally have a consistent start that you need to show up for is so valuable.
Is that 9 a.m. start point sacrosanct? I mean, is that something that you just never deviate from? And is that Monday through Friday? Is that 7 days a week? How hardcore are you about hitting that mark?
Yeah, this is Monday through Friday. I think it's important. One thing that's really easy to do is to sort of put your art happens on like Saturday and Sunday. The weekend is like your catch-up time for your art. No. You got to build it in. You have to build it in sustainably into your life. It can't be like the thing you squeeze into your free time or your break time, because otherwise it's an afterthought. And you also never get time to actually rest, and you always feel like you're catching up. So Monday through Friday, you can customize your schedule to whatever works. But I think if you do Saturday, Sunday and never give yourself a break or set it up as like a second priority, that can be a problem. And it is really sacrosanct. And I have another artist, a painter who I do a weekly call with, and it's a weekly check-in call where we talk about our work. And that's so important because you both need the consistency to show up and make work. And then you also need to take a step back and have somebody to just touch base with, get a sense of your progress, and like talk through stuff so you don't get stuck. Like it's important to not just be working alone in a vacuum and to have accountability and other artists to talk to.
So 9 a.m. starts. Is that 2 hours every morning, 3 hours every morning? And to hit that 9 a.m. mark every morning, I'm guessing there are the precursor to that. You have to get to bed by a certain time. You have to, rest and be prepared to get in here at 9 a.m. I have found personally, like cutting drinking out significantly has really helped me with those markers. I don't know if there's anything else to be said about what comes before that also helps you make sure you're staying consistent with that. But I'd love to hear about it. Yeah.
Actually, I stopped drinking as well.
Entirely.
For the same reason. I make exceptions. New Year's, my family, my family has a New Year's tradition that involves drinking, and so we have certain times, and I didn't stop drinking because it was a problem. So I'm somebody who can make exceptions like that, but I do find that not drinking just gives me more energy, and it makes it easier to show up for your own. Like it makes it easier to show up for your goals when you don't have this.
Crippling hangover.
Yeah, exactly. I quit drinking, and it was sort of it was sort of by accident. Like I just had been not seeing, like it just hadn't come up for a little bit, and then I was like, oh, maybe we go another month. Why not? And I hadn't realized actually how much it was like physically affecting me. Yeah, I was like, oh wow, I need a lot more sleep when I drink, and I'm a lot more sluggish and have less energy. Go figure. But yeah, it is stuff like that where if you can just make your life a little easier with choices that don't actually require more time, that's a big win.
And so then when you start at 9, it's a minimum of 1 hour, or how do you think about like honoring that amount of time? I'd love to hear about just generally how long of the day you're actually at work typically, and how strict you are with that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that everyone has to come up with their own system and figure out how to be flexible with themselves. And I think the biggest thing is that you set up with what your goals are and what you want to do. And sometimes it's really easy when you don't meet your goals and you kind of mess up and you don't do the thing, you don't do your routine. You just got to restart. You say, okay, that didn't work. This week is going to be different. You reset. You don't beat yourself up. You just say, okay, well, can we make it, how can we make it easier next week to like actually follow through on this? And I think that's a big thing, because I think a lot of the time, people set like New Year's resolutions, but it's like sometimes you got to set a February 9th, and we're starting over with our New Year's resolution. Like you don't want to wait until next January to try again, because week 2 of the new year, you already are off your routine. Just reset. It's okay.
Yeah. A mini intervention.
Yeah. You do little mini interventions and you say, oops, didn't go well that week. Why didn't it go well? What can I do to make it easier for myself and to build in? I mean, the first step of this was like, having a call, like having another person that I talk to, like so much easier. So just continuing to try to build in infrastructure and support and help to make those habits work, and not being too hard on yourself, but just sort of looking at it as, how can I make this easier?
How do you decide what to create? I mean, I'm looking at 3 or 4 of your pieces of art right now that all look quite different from each other. Does this sort of pour out of you in a way that's mysterious? Do you have a whiteboard of different ideas for creations that you want to knock out? How do these things come to be?
That's a great question. Yeah. I mean, I sort of go through bodies of work, which I think is traditional for artists. You work on a series and then you maybe move on to something that's related, but shifts your focus into a new topic or area. For the last maybe 6 months, I started doing research, and then now I have like a very deep practice in exploring what I'm calling the botany of bodies and exploring themes of creation and origins. And I'm looking at this in terms of artist, like to be an artist, to be a person who creates, but also thinking about creation more broadly. This all started from almost like a panic attack about why, like, oh my God, I'm trying to be an oil painter in 2025. Like AI is exploding. Like, we're going to have this total revolution of technology. And I'm like, oh, good. I chose, like I've chosen to focus on making physical paintings with oil paint that I paint slowly and meticulously. Like, what am I doing? And I had a little bit of anxiety about this. And then I kind of was taking a step back and saying, yeah, but this is actually something that's important and I need to do it. And how can I search for meaning in why I need to be making these paintings? And so I was looking for like myth stories, thinking about like Joseph Campbell and these kind of universal stories and arcs about what it is to find meaning in your life. And so I started looking at myth stories and trying to find trends and sort of people who had to confront creative practices within changing and evolving times that were quite different than what they had sort of started with, and trying to look for patterns. And ironically, I ended up looking at a lot of mythological like creation stories about how people, like what people think about creation, which was very relevant in my mind to AI, this new artificial intelligence that we are creating, and how I square it being in a time where we have this, and also how my relationship as a creator, both as a woman and as an artist and as trying to make sense of being a person in 2025.
And that research tends to inspire what comes out of you? Or when you start, do you have a general sense of where this is heading, or not at all?
Yeah, well, it's a little bit of a combination. I think I can get really in my head and like just go down rabbit holes. And then I have to remind myself to like step out of the rabbit hole and start actually making stuff because it's important to actually digest what I'm reading about or what I'm thinking about and form it into creation. And that actually gets sort of to the heart of it, is it's how to actually keep making things and not just be in my own head and my own spiral, but actually to be generative. One of my friends has a mother who's an artist, and she always said, create before you consume. Just like make something before you start consuming something. And that's a nice thing.
What does that mean?
Yeah. Well, it means, before you start watching a television show, maybe do a little writing.
I see.
Or before you start, it's like, yeah, you should go to the museum, but also like make a sketch before you go, make sure it's in balance, like your appreciation for art, you're exploring and you're experiencing the world, make sure it's in balance with you also creating things, because you're a creator. That's who you are if you're an artist. And if those things fall out of balance, in that you're consuming a lot more than you're generating, then I think that can make people, that can be quite sad. And I think keeping that in mind, to go down the rabbit hole and to be curious and to be exploratory, but to make sure that you're also making things and sharing those rabbit holes with other people and taking steps out. I think that's very important.
Eat your vegetables before you have dessert, sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
What have you learned from Joseph Campbell?
Joseph Campbell's a very interesting, he's an incredible person. I'm really exploring, one thing I'm exploring in this kind of botany of bodies is these interconnectedness, looking at how the veins on our wrists mirror the way that leaves, the veins on leaves and plants look, and looking at how, these apples look so, they look so feminine, and that there's these sort of flows and patterns and symbols that really connect us. And reading a lot of Joseph Campbell and a lot of mythology, and thinking about how there's tremendous overlap between storytelling across cultures, and these kind of, the search for meaning has been going on for all of human history. And there's a lot we can learn by looking at the overlaps. So I think he's quite brilliant in that. And then, of course, also as a woman, it's interesting because he didn't think the hero's journey applied to women.
Is that right?
Yeah. And it's funny because I think he's so brilliant and I have so much respect for his work, and it's been so influential. But I'm kind of laughing because it's like, of course, the hero's journey applies to women. The Genesis story, like Eve is kind of the original protagonist. She's the first person to sort of take an action and have it affect the world, and it's like we see there's a lot of women doing things in mythology, and there's certainly room for women to have heroes' journeys. So looking at Joseph Campbell, but then also looking at non-Western stories and looking at how this permeates into a lot of different cultures, and a universality has been really compelling and helpful for me to mine from for my own artistic practice.
So this show, I think, as you know, is filled with stories from people, from New York artists. And I don't know much about the artistic community in New York. I know there are a ton of artists in terms of actual like painters, people that are producing what you are. How has your experience been with the art community in that definition in New York? I know you have these meetings that it seems like are very helpful for you, but I'd love to hear about just like your general take on the state of painters, specifically of art makers in New York in, the end of 2025. What is your read? What's your pulse on that, on the status of life and the experience for people who are doing that, and also for you, like the community side of things as it pertains to the work that you do?
Yeah, I think that community is extremely important. And I think everybody kind of knows that, but it's easier said than done. Finding your community, finding finding a community and figuring out how to work that in to your practice and to your lifestyle is really tricky. I'm sure other artists have struggled with this, where you're like, okay, I need to paint and I also need to go to shows and I also need to hang out with other artists, but how do I do all those things? And you're like, do I go to the opening or do I paint? Question. So finding community and figuring out how to put that into balance with your practice is important. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. I know a lot of artists who have benefited tremendously from crit clubs. So basically environments where you get together with a cluster or group of artists on a regular basis to talk about your work. And I've been trying to kind of make my own mini crit club and figuring out how to expand that. And I think that's important, is you really only need one other artist to get started. That's already a community. If you can build more than that, that's great, but that's already a community. And there's crit clubs, and there's also other things like there's a group of artists that get together and play pool together. That they're all paint. It's like they talk shop. It's painting talk, and whatever your art form, there's going to be little pockets of community like that, and you'll find them if you just start going to other artists' shows, events, etc. That's a great way to connect with the community. But you can also just start with one other person whose work you respect and think is great, and finding ways to be accountable to each other and support each other.
You said at the very beginning of the conversation that you think you always kind of knew you wanted to end up in New York or be in New York. Do you think that's mostly because this is still the art capital of the world? How do you explain that instinct to want to live here?
Yeah. For me, New York was synonymous with being a creative person who was in community with other creative people. There's other cities that have art communities, but I still think that New York for visual arts is really the number one. But of course, there's other cities that really do have creative communities and different cultures that you can connect with. If you want to work in film, Los Angeles is still a really good place to be. So there's different cities that have different characters. For me, New York was always synonymous with having an art studio, having a painting practice, and being able to have artist friends and go to shows and be a part of that culture and scene.
If you had a friend who was moving here for the first time and wanted to try to develop their own community here, what are the clubs, the methods, the ways in which maybe it's just going to shows, but how can people begin to develop that in your experience as an artist to connect with other artists here? What's the best way to do that? Yeah,
I think going to shows is a really good way to do that. Showing up and going to shows pretty intentionally. So you don't just go to a show because it's a show. Look at art. Who do you like? Who's making work that you think is interesting? It's either relevant to your work or you just like it, it's good. And then try to show up at that. And that's an easier way to sort of connect with people who will have shared instincts with you, because you're going to start meeting like-minded people if you're patroning and showing up for work that you find compelling and valuable.
What is the best way to find out about those shows? Like, how do people like you learn about what's happening and where to go?
Yeah. Well, one thing you can kind of do, and this is very importantly, not the algorithm. The algorithm, I don't know, maybe it'll get it right, maybe it won't. But start with an artist that you like, just one, and go find them on Instagram. Most artists have publicly viewable pages on Instagram because artists want to be discovered, and Instagram is still a place that's a visual medium. If you're a writer, go to Twitter or Substack, even better if you're a writer. Whatever your medium, figure out where's the social media hub for that medium. And then you just find one artist and you can just follow you can follow the sort of trail. So you look at what other artists have commented on artwork by an artist you like, who their friends are, do you have mutuals? And you can follow it. Like an artist that you like is going to be in a group show. Look at who those other artists are. Do they have shows? And you can really just start to trace your own kind of DIY schedule and plan. I mean, there's definitely places to just find out about shows. Seesaw is an app for visual artists that tells you what shows are happening and on a map. It has little pins, so that's helpful. And then there's other websites that are, aggregating or featuring this. But I think like it's much easier to just go down the social path and kind of craft your own by really just following artist to artist and tracing these artistic communities, because you're not going to know about the underground. You're not going to find out about the underground show on any major platform. You're going to find out about it because you connected with an artist who's friends with an artist that you follow, who's in a group show with another artist that you now follow.
We talked before we started recording about I think it's in April, you were mentioning that you're going to have a showing of your artwork in Brooklyn. And I would love to hear any advice you might have on how to create those sort of opportunities as an artist. You obviously made this happen for yourself somehow. What do you think are the best strategies, or what has worked for you to set this up, to showcase your work, to meet other artists live, to potentially sell your work? How do you think about that?
Yeah. My first solo show in New York, I was painting. I'd started to paint really consistently, and I started to have a few works that I was really proud of and looked good. And I had them posted on my Instagram, which is like, it's like a little portfolio, basically. You can use a website, but it doesn't matter. You just have to have some place where you've actually made stuff and it's in a place that you can see. And then I just started putting myself out there. I just started going to shows for friends, shows for collectors and galleries I liked. And I went to one show and, just started talking to some people that were there. We were talking about the artist whose show we were at and how nice the work was. And they asked me, if I knew the artist, who I was. And, I started talking about how I'm an artist. And I mentioned, I'm looking for a show. I'm trying to find a gallery right now to represent my work. And they made an introduction, and I got offered a show that same day. They were like, come to this party we're going to afterwards and meet so and such. And I went, and it was like done. And it's funny, you can put in months and months of effort and then it'll just happen. But I think the biggest thing is to, one, be clear and intentional about what you're trying to do, because you don't really manifest things by not having articulated what you're actually looking for and want. And you have to actually you have to do the work. Doing a lot of networking, if you don't have any paintings, is not very helpful. But yeah, putting yourself out there, but not like selling yourself. Like, don't go to some other artist's show and then try to make it about you and get your own show. Like, let people genuinely appreciate other artists, genuinely go and support them, generally be a part of the community. And then when people ask you, which they inevitably will, then you can show them. But don't focus on self-promotion, focus on doing the work and then showing up for other artists.
I love that. I would love to close with asking you, as I like to ask guests, about how you think about success. We're in your own studio. I'm looking at a lot of work that you've produced. You've been in New York now for, I know, a number of years. When you look at your future, the next 3 to 5 years, say, what does that word mean to you? How do you think about success as it applies specifically to your career for yourself?
Yeah. So there's different frameworks for success. One is sort of external validation and monetary support. And then there's another version, which is a more internal version of success. And I think that I'm focused really on, it would be really great to have, more collectors, to be selling my work for more money. These are all nice things, but I'm not really interested in selling crappy, I could make money, right? I could make a lot of money right now creating really generic pop art works that I hawk on, Instagram and, blah, blah, blah. There's a way to and that's not what I'm interested in. I want to build a real and sustainable career and art practice that's built on making work that I feel matters, with a bigger end goal and what success looks like, rather than shorter term success or even a focus on financial success that's divorced from what I actually want to make and say and do with this life. So for me, my North Star in terms of success is making paintings that express what I want to say and do it in a way that I find compelling and exciting and engaging. Like, I have to like the work. If I don't like the work, then it's not successful. So step one is passing my own filter for what my work should be about, which is that it's new, it's innovative, it's interesting, and it's beautiful. Or it's very compellingly ugly. But so like, that's the first thing, is getting it to be successful for me. And I think that's, you are your own toughest critic, is a very true statement for me, and also I think for a lot of other artists. So first, success looks like making me happy with my own work. And then the next step is to start to build build out from there in terms of continuing to build my practice and deepen it, while also maybe getting some more, external signs of success. Yep. But I'm not worried about the external stuff until my paintings are at a stage where all of my work consistently and constantly is work that I love and I'm really excited about.
And I want to sneak in one addition to that, which you did allude to this a bit in the conversation, but what do you think it is you are trying to say through this? And I'm sure this is a moving target and changes as you change in your life, but in general, do you notice themes that you feel like you are expressing, you are saying in the art that you create?
Yeah. I think, really simply put, my paintings are in pursuit of and in search of meaning. I know that's a pretty broad thing. I'm like, what's the meaning of life? Let's try to figure it out from painting. But I am sort of looking at visual themes where I see interconnectedness across plants and animals and humans and environments, and exploring ideas and looking at how there are patterns or trends or ways to sort of explore and delve into meaning, using visual art as a medium for thinking and exploring. By
combining all of those aspects of nature into your productions, basically, do you feel like there's a clear message of meaning in what you're producing, or it's a bit ambiguous even to you when it's done?
Yeah, I think when I've finished making a few paintings that are kind of within conversation with each other, it does help me to understand in a deeper way things that I'm grappling with and struggling with internally. It's like, aha. And it's similar to, sometimes when you're writing, the act of trying to put it into words, you realize you don't actually have clarity of thought. You're like, oh no, that doesn't sound, no, that's not right. And you have to keep rewriting it until you can read it and go, oh yeah, that's it. That's what I was trying to say. And it's that same kind of iterative process with a painting where it's like, I know it when I go in with a plan, but I don't really know what it's a pretty broad strokes plan. And I have to keep iterating, and I kind of uncover the meaning through the act of painting and go, that's it. There it is.
So cool. Elise, thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, my pleasure.